and welcome to another episode of Random Access Memories with me, Jake Bernardes. This one I'm really excited for. This is a conversation that I had in London, I think was it last year? Last year, I think, when I ended up going to an event where Joe was speaking and sat next to Prathiba, and we talked a lot about her job, her career, what she does now, and then also a bit about the kind of like what's it like to be on the other side of a breach when you're not the person in the hot seat or in the dock, but also the person having to deal with all that kind of stress and behind the scenes. So I wanted to try and have this conversation where we authentically ask, what's it like in a family setting, and not what's it like in a workplace setting. So thank you, Joe and Prathiba, for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you want to start by just introducing yourselves, I always ask the same three questions. Who are you and what do you do? That kind of thing. And then what's your hobby? And then who is your hero, your idol, your inspiration? Whoever wants to go first, I don't care. Let's go ladies first.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Prathiba. I'm Joe's wife. My hobby, I'd say, is cooking, and mostly fusion cooking. And my hero has always been my grandmother. She was a homemaker, but she helped her community around her. And when she passed away, there was a whole group of people outside thanking her for all the different things that she's done for their lives. So she's always been my hero.
That's cool.
That's awesome. I can validate that one. I've heard Prathiba talk about her grandmother a million times, and I wish I could have met her. So my name is Joe Sullivan, and I'm Prathiba's husband. And my favorite hobby is skiing. And in fact, so much so that when we met, Prathiba didn't know how to ski, and she is now a double black diamond skier since I've dragged across many a slope, and now she loves it too, thankfully.
I do.
Who's your hero?
Well, looking down on us is a poster of Abraham Lincoln that I got when I was my first job right out of school. I went to Washington, D.C. for training, and I went to the Lincoln Memorial, and I got a $2 poster, and I've had it by my desk ever since for the last more than 30 years. And it was because I went to law school, and the reason I went to law school is because I'd read all these books about Abraham Lincoln when I was growing up. And I didn't actually know any lawyers. I don't think I'd ever met a practicing lawyer before I went to law school, but it was just like what Abraham Lincoln stood for and the way he had practiced law was what I'd read about. And so that was, he was definitely an inspirational driver.
That's interesting. I read 2 books in COVID that define my 2 heroes. One of them is Lincoln, and the second is Alexander Hamilton. Both from books, and then mainstream media. One that had a movie about him, and one that had obviously a musical about them. But it's interesting. Yeah, I found 2 in kind of the American founding fathers, so to speak. How did you 2 meet? You talked about how you became skiers, but how did you meet?
We met professionally. It was funny. I was working as the CSO at Cloudflare. I joined in 2018. And when at that time, Cloudflare was a small private company, but it was growing fast, and I think had aspirations. And so I joined in 2018, reporting to the CEO, Matthew Prince, and he had given me the mandate to come in and build a world-class security organization. And that's something that I had done twice before at Facebook and Uber. And so I came in 2018, and I got a subscription to LinkedIn Recruiter and was working really hard to try and build the best possible security organization. And I think it was in summer of 2019 that I messaged Prathiba in LinkedIn and said, I see that you work in cybersecurity. Would you consider leaving your company and coming to my company? And she said, actually, I decided to stop my job, and I'm going to Stanford Business School. And it was really strange because at that time I was halfway done with preparing a talk on how security leaders don't really understand business. And I would like to introduce some business concepts because I had come to the conclusion that I'd effectively, after 25 years in cybersecurity, developed an MBA through osmosis of, reporting to business executives and being in the exec room. And so, long story short, we ended up meeting and creating a program where we did training for cybersecurity executives on understanding business. and we took a cohort of up and coming CISOs here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we would meet with them once a month and spend some time going through business concepts with them and talking through things from different angles. So we were doing that professionally until COVID hit, and then
we left. We were not in Dutch anymore, and then we got back in Dutch when I was finally moving to Palo Alto, the neighborhood that he lives in. I wanted to meet him to ask about schools and things like that, and then and then the rest is history. It became a date.
It was funny because we didn't know much. Like, when you work with people professionally, you don't always ask a lot of personal questions. And when she reached out about talking about schools in Palo Alto, in her email, she said, "My ex-husband and I are moving to Palo Alto." And I was like, "Did you say?" I was also going through a divorce at that point. I'd already separated and was in the process of finalizing a divorce. And so we met for coffee to talk about schools. And
yeah. So we always say, when people ask in one sentence, we met on the famous dating app, LinkedIn.
You'd be surprised how many people meet on LinkedIn and end up getting married, I think.
Yeah. Lots of people tell me you should never tell that story because it sounds like you're trying to find a wife on LinkedIn. And I was like, no, I always have to tell the long version.
To get around the problem. Prathiba, talk to me from your side. Like, Joe's obviously a known individual. So when you took that job, like, I'm assuming you did some Googling. Like, how did that work in your head? Like, tell me about that, the kind of thought process from your side.
Yeah, I don't know. I just looked at him as a person, and and when we met and we talked about things, we would talk for the whole hour about just different things, and he was just so easy to talk to. And I don't think he was the person that he was portrayed in the press or anything. There was a whole different angle about him that I saw during our meetings. And I think everybody sees the same thing when you meet Joe in person. He's just a different person from whatever they portray of him. So it was we would just spend the whole 45 minutes. It would go by so quickly, and I'd look forward to our next conversation. And that's how it was. And then as much as he's in the cybersecurity field, I'm probably very not risk averse. So I didn't care about all the things on press.
So talk to me about that. Like, you say it's obviously very different. You'd obviously formed a kind of conceived idea from what you'd read. You said you'd read the press and it was different to the press. So talk to me about that. Like, what did you expect and what was different? It's kind of like...
Well, to be fair, I don't think I specifically thought much about what was in the news or anything like that. Like, when I met with him, I saw a genuinely authentic person trying to do the right thing. And I always knew what was said there was not the truth. So it was a human to human connection, and that's all it was. And so, yeah. I have now come to the conclusion that there's a version of a person online and there's a version of a person who's in reality. So, yeah.
Interesting. I guess I can turn that question back to you. Just you talk about LinkedIn dating, but we're not saying LinkedIn dating. So you've obviously, how does that feel as a person where obviously there is a version of you online?
Yeah.
But I know you as well. It's not a fair reflection of who you are, right? But how do you deal with that when you meet people, especially in like a romantic scene? There's a difference in a work one, but how do you deal with that from a romantic setting when people have seen stuff that you're like, well, that's not me?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think we thought of. I don't know. Maybe I didn't think about it too much. Maybe I had been in a long-term relationship and had a family, and she did too, and we were both kind of coming out of that. And it was the middle of the pandemic, and we started dating in the summer of 2021. And we were just in this like weird world where everything was like a Twilight Zone back during pandemic era. And I think I got the benefit of Prathiba having not grown up in the United States, didn't maybe fully appreciate when I said, I'm under indictment.
It's like, what's that? What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Well, it was kind of a weird thing where I had gotten indicted in 2020, and this case is pending, but I'm still working full time as the chief security officer at Cloudflare. So it's the pandemic, but I'm working full time. She's working full. I guess she was working full time because she had graduated from business school and was working at a company, I think, and um, so it was like neither one of us, like we look back at it actually happily because neither one of us spend time in dating apps, and we have too many friends who talk about the unpleasant experience of living in dating app life, and so somehow we avoided that.
Is it, Prathiba, is it difficult? Because obviously, I'm assuming like you'll have had conversations at home where Joe's indictment's going on, and you're thinking this is all taking the piss. Like none of this is true. Like, is it hard hearing the other side of the story, but not really being able to like do anything with it? Just being able to like, because people form opinions, right? But you can't go and argue them in the world. That's part of the legal problem here.
Yeah, it's that definitely was a pretty difficult chapter because um, one of the things that happens on a daily basis is you see stuff in the press, and then there's actually industry gossip of people talking about him in a different way on LinkedIn or whatever other social media. And so you're hearing all of those things. And initially, it's definitely like a shock to the system to like, you know, be at the other end of it. And that's not normal. I mean, even if you're an exec, you're facing long hours and, your husband's not home traveling, that's one thing. But having this sort of environment where it's hostile outside is a different circumstance altogether. And so one of the things I think we did at home was we didn't come back and we didn't come back and just talk about all the things that's happening. We compartmentalized. So at home it was just a home atmosphere. We talked about things that mattered, like what's going on with this kid, or like what's happening at school, or date nights. And we kept all the traditions as well. Like we kept our vacations, we kept birthdays, we had dinners with our kids, and so it was a completely home atmosphere. It was compartmentalized, and that I think helped a lot because we're more than that case, and we have a whole life together. So I think that was one of the ways we coped at home.
Yeah, that's a good point because I was coming to the relationship with three teenage daughters, and she was coming with a, I think, 9-year-old son, and so when you're coming to the world with kids, you're thinking, obviously we were more focused on making sure our kids were supportive and happy with our relationship than thinking about a lot of other things like the case. And also, I was probably foolishly optimistic about how the case was going to turn out and may not have projected the total gravity of the situation, uh, even like accepting it myself. Like if I go back to 2020 before we started dating, like my lawyer, when I did get indicted, I think it was my lawyer and Matthew Prince both said to me, "You are irrationally in denial that you were going to get charged," because I didn't believe I was going to get charged because I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. And then once I got charged, I didn't think I was going to lose the trial because I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. And so I just kept believing that in the end, people are going to figure this out and this is all going to go away.
I have so many questions. I'm going to go two different directions. I'm coming back to the kids because the kids interest me. You said you were kind of naive to indictment and stuff, right, which is fine. But I'm assuming not all of your family and friends were at the time when you said you were dating a guy that they could Google and it said he's being indicted in federal court. Did anyone tell you, like, what the hell are you doing? This is not a good idea.
That was the most shocking part, Jake. Like, I know my parents are from, traditional India, and I'd have expected them to say, like, what are you doing? Step back. But they were so supportive. My mom every day, and I'm from a Christian family, my mom every day would say, I'm praying for Joe and hope, everything works out for good. And all my friends were supportive as well. In fact, they all wrote letters for Joe as they've seen him at home. And so I had a lot of support from my community, and I think that helped a lot. And I probably take that for granted a little bit. And when you ask the question, it just strikes me it could have gone the other way. So that was one thing that went very well. The other thing that went very well was, we're a blended family, and all of our kids just got along so well. And that need not have happened either. So we also take that for granted a little bit. And the funny thing is, they have so many things in common. One of the things was all four were vegetarian kids, which
And we're not vegetarian, which is
Oh,
yeah.
really? Well, that's a bit of a nightmare. Let's stay on the kids thing, because I've seen a few places where you've put like, my daughter texted me to say she just heard you've been arrested. How is that? Because teenagers aren't like little kids, right? They've got access to social media. They have friends who are probably horrible. Like, how was that with your children? Like in the initial first phase, when you're talking about what's happened, trying to explain it, their reactions, what they're probably facing in school or with their friendship groups, where your name is all over the newspapers, all over the press. How was that? Because that must be hard to be a parent there.
yeah. Honestly, I think it's natural as a parent to, when things happen, you put your kids first, and you like I remember, like when I when I lost the trial, and the jury came back and said guilty. My first reaction, standing at the defense table, was my kids in the front row and my daughter, who's away at college, who couldn't come for the sentencing, watching on video. I think watching on audio. Yeah, watching on Zoom, um, and thinking like about them more than myself. But um, but to flip it around, they honestly, they were great. Uh, all three of the girls were, in terms of, they just, nothing changed. And I think about back to, I tell this story sometimes. Back the day that maybe in some ways I went through probably three really hard days. One was the day that I got fired from Uber in 2017. The second was when I got indicted, and the third was when I lost the trial. And in some ways, the one that hit me the hardest was the one in 2017 when I got fired from Uber, because it came so out of left field and surprised me, and I'd never been knocked down like that in my life, and and I didn't know how to react, and didn't feel supported by a community the way I did later when the other things happened. And uh, the day that I got fired, I had been planning. We were up in the mountains because it was Thanksgiving and we were on vacation, and I had told the girls that we were going to go for a hike. And so I got fired, and my immediate reaction was, I need to get a phone. I need to start figuring out how to deal with this situation. But instead I went hiking with my daughters, and we were out hiking, and I had a water bottle that I was carrying, but I didn't have a pocket or a place to put it. So I tucked it in the back of my collar, for a little bit. And I always remember my eldest daughter was hiking behind me, and she said, "Unemployed man, camelback." Like, I was literally been fired publicly on the front page of like every newspaper of the world. And an hour later, my daughter's making a joke about it, and we could laugh. And
Teenagers.
that was everything. It's like, you can shut out the world when you have kids like that, and you can just, and also when they're teenagers, their world is also a very competing priority for them. The stress of being a teenager in today's world, with the academics, the social stuff, the online stuff, just their own lives, I think, pulls them back into it. And so we were able to find a balance, and almost have a sense of normalcy most of the time.
Mm. I think when you go back, people have asked the stupid question: if you went back, would you do anything different? I'm more interested in that one. What surprised you most? If you reflect on that period, what surprised you most about yourself? Either weak or strong, like something that you didn't expect.
I think, the ability to compartmentalize and get back onto
Mm.
life. I I think about like after losing, after getting fired and after losing the trial, and I jokingly refer to those as like the two times I went into like Grizzly Adams hibernation mode. Like after I got fired from Uber, I look at my badge photo from when I started at Cloudflare in 2018, and I'm shocked that they hired me because I had a full beard. it was like I, it was like I wanted to like hide and not be recognized, and like project to the world that I had like checked out or something. And you know, I think before I actually started at Cloudflare, I did shave it off and come back to a normal person. Thank
Come back
goodness.
off the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that it was surprising for me about him, um, and I think this incident kind of probably lays it out very clearly, is we lost the trial, worst day. We were coming out, and we had two cars, like us in one car, and the kids had brought the kid mobile, and so we were both in cars. We were going on the 101 highway, and we were like literally racing each other, rolling down the windows, looking at each other and laughing. And this was right after we lost the trial, and we didn't know what was going to happen to it. And we came back home, we cooked, we laughed, and that part was, it's surprising to think like in that moment it was like a different reaction from what one would normally expect. But I think, to his point, it's that ability to compartmentalize, but also like how strong we are and resilient we are as humans. And we had this belief throughout that we're going to be just fine. Like, just always, that was always the underlying thing. Like, no matter what, we're going to be fine. And we, during the period between losing and sentencing, we had this whole period where we had to look at things like what jail he might end up in and what's going to happen, because we both couldn't really think of a career.
So this was my next question, because I think like most of us in the industry think that the eventual sentencing is still crazy, and I can say that because I'm not American, so they can't do anything to me, right? And I think Joe says honestly that he went in quite naively, but you probably didn't, right? So at some point it must have crossed your mind he might go to prison.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
processing that, talk to me
Yeah.
that bit, because that bit's got to be horrendous if you're thinking your spouse might go to prison.
Yeah.
It was after losing the trial. We lost the trial, and like the verdict was in
May 4th.
so the verdict was at the beginning of October, and the sentencing wasn't until the beginning of May. So we had a long period
Like
of time
6 months.
where we were in this like limbo of not knowing what's next. I had to leave Cloudflare after losing the trial. That was something we'd agreed well before, that if I did, because it would some customers dropped Cloudflare because Cloudflare kept me pending the trial, and I didn't want that, and the company didn't want to have to deal with the attention of me going through a sentencing. But so after the losing the trial, we had this extended period of time where I wasn't able to work at the company, so I had to actually face it much more. We were very frustrated with the legal team that we had after we lost the trial, because they had, I mean, literally to the time of the verdict, they were saying that we were going to win, and we really limited the defense we put on, because their view was we don't even need to put on a defense, and so we had a lot of frustration. But they then, asked after we came out of the trial, and we started talking to the government, like, can we reach an agreed sentencing position between the two sides? Because there's always negotiations in these in cases like this, and we couldn't, because the government said they were going to come in and argue for, I think, 3 years of prison. And so that's what we had in the back of our head as to get back to your question. We were thinking about, like, the government's going to go and argue that I should get 3 years in prison. And so that's when we started talking to, like, we found people who'd been through these processes, people who'd been to prison. We were talking to lots of people trying to figure out, like, what's the difference between the federal prisons in California versus the federal prison in Oregon versus the one in, Florida, and why would why do we see some people choosing to go to prisons in Oklahoma and other, we just had to go deep into all these things and figure out, like,
Yeah, we just turned into action mode.
Yeah.
It was two things. It was okay. What are the chances that we can minimize this whole situation? Like, what are the best options and outcomes for us? That's one. And then, if the worst does happen, how do we cope with it, and what do we do? So those were the two things we were working on. So on the sentencing front, we had the ability to provide one last argument to the judge on why it should not be prison, and so we worked on that a whole lot. Like, we got so much data on the judge's verdicts in the past. So I jumped in. I'm a data person, so I jumped in on all the analysis and like what is the right argument and position to have, and we started directing the lawyers on what they should say. The thing flipped around, and we started taking control over the whole legal argument and so on. So that was our action mode. And
So that's
then,
action mode is great, but I guess the question, Prathiba, is were you confident? Because you're there sitting otherwise thinking, I've now got 3 teenage daughters that I'm going to have and my son, a blended family, and I'm going to effectively become a single parent for some period of time, which is at this point unforeseen because the government's just saying we're going to go for prison. We're not going to say what's that outcome's going to be like. I get the action, I get that kind of takes your mind off things, but I can't believe that there isn't you going to bed at night thinking about this.
yeah, I mean, I was beginning to think about, how do I get to prison? How do I get to see him? Should I become a
Gosh.
paralegal, so I get to see him more often? And
Because
how do I balance the time between being at home with the kids and going and seeing him in prison?
Man.
So I started having a whole plan for that.
she actually so if someone that we are friends with had gone through a process strangely similar where he started dating someone right before they went to prison, and he's an attorney, and he said, well, I was able to go visit every day because I'm an attorney. And so she said to him, wait, so if I was a paralegal, would I be able to go
So
visit
you were
whenever I
literally
want?
planning for this in terms of like changing your career to make sure you had the access. Gosh, that's
Yes,
insane.
yes. She was like, hey, would you hire me as a paralegal? I'll gladly switch to be a paralegal if I could, because like when you research and you realize like standard visitation is like once a week and on
Yeah.
this narrow scope, but if you're a part of the person's legal team, you can go see them every day.
Yeah.
And which is what our friend had done with his now wife, and so she was literally like, she was in full action mode. I'll say that we both were. We're
Yeah.
we're not. We're not people who like sit around and say, "Whoa, is me." We're people who think like, "Okay, what can I do to control or change my situation?" We don't like the world dictating to us. I think that time was the scariest time of my life because it was the time I most felt like someone else has control of my life. The judge, the judge could make a decision that could fundamentally change my life, and that's a really scary thing, and something that I'm used to being a person who feels comfortable like taking I started working when I was 10 and was had 2 jobs in college and sometimes 3, and believed that like I could take care of myself, and to be in a situation where the banks are shutting down my accounts and
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
homeowners insurance is canceling and car insurance is canceling and my 401k is sending me a check and saying, if you don't deposit it in a different 401k, the government's going to fine you for withdrawing your money early. I was dealing with all these things and it was just like, it felt like so much less in control of my life than I'd ever felt before.
Yeah. And yeah, the other thing that was also going on through our heads is like, what are our children seeing? Like, what are we doing as role models for them in a situation where it's a tough time? They're looking at how we're handling crisis. They're looking at how we're reacting to the world when people say bad things about us and about him. And like, they're looking at us the whole time on how we're handling the situation. And that was also an important thing for us, to set that example for our kids that we love no matter what. And that he's more than his worst day or the worst comment in the press and the worst case scenario. And so that's another thing we were grappling with, and making sure that our kids see the best version of us.
We we tried really hard to live a normal life with our family during this all, if it's possible. I'll give you a concrete example. Uh, Second daughter during the trial was her senior year in high school, and her school has a father-daughter. She was going to an all-girls school, and they have a father-daughter dinner dance that I would go to every year with my daughters, and the daughter, the dads of the senior girls are required to do a dance in front of the whole school, and the dance was scheduled for exactly in the middle of my trial. And I had to do two dances of like 5 minutes long. And we're talking about like BTS like dances, like serious, like this, the dads hire a choreographer and dance to the music that the kids like. And it's a lot of work. And the dads meet and prep every Saturday
Wow.
like a month and a half, and you get these videos. And so during my trial, I would deal with the trial, and then at like 9 o'clock, and also your daughter's not supposed to see that you're preparing for this dance or know anything about what the music's going to be or the dances are going to be. And so I'm in the middle of trial, and at 10 o'clock at night, I'm pulling out like the dance steps and trying to find a room where I can be by myself and practice these dance moves.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, when the trial, there was like some cases with witnesses saying all sorts of things about him, and I asked him like, "Are you doing okay?" There's all of these things that the person said, and he's like, "No, I was just practicing my dance moves in my head. I wasn't paying attention to what's happening."
I was, and yeah, and so I look at the video. I look back on the video, and
he was one of the best ones because he remembered all of his steps.
I guess it gives you focus, right? I mean, here's a thought for you. So you said your grandmother was your hero at the beginning, Prathiba, right? And my grandmother and grandfather are very much mine. And when they were young, my grandfather was a prisoner of war twice, in fact. So unlucky that he escaped from a prisoner of war camp and got taken back into a prisoner of war camp only like literally months later. My grandmother was told that he was dead. She was pregnant at the time with her first son. She was told he was dead. And he turned back at the door one day, knocked on the door. She'd had her first child, and she didn't even know he was alive. And they turned back up, right? And they had to deal with this whole challenging period. Now, she always told me that the strongest relationships are forged in fire. But she said they were married for, I think, like 50 something, 55, 60 years or something crazy. And she said it's because they went through hardships together. And I'm an advocate for, like, I think that relationships are formed when things are challenging. Now, you've talked a lot about compartmentalizing and trying to stay separate from trial and children and trial and relationship. But do you think that going through this made your individual relationship and your relationship with your kids stronger because of what you went through?
Yeah, 100%. I think seeing somebody in their worst moments and how they are, and they still love you, and you still love them in that worst moment. There's something about that. Not necessarily in the happiest moment or when you're out on a date, but like when you're in that moment and you still love each other, then you know that that person truly loves you, right? Like no matter what, and they're going to be with you no matter what, and they're your rock. And I think that's how it is for us, right?
definitely.
Yeah.
If you could go back to something like the darkest moments, do you think that now you tell yourself different advice than you did at the time? Or do you think that you kind of live in the moment anyway? There's nothing you can go back and change. Like, what would you go back and tell yourself over your shoulder as a ghost?
I think about this, and it's one thing in particular. It's that we have this real sense that, like Pratibha described, when it came to the sentencing, after losing the trial, we moved from passive mode to active mode.
Mm.
I look back and I feel like for the first few years, the part before I met her and the part after we were together, leading up to the trial, where I just kind of let the lawyers do their thing. It's weird. I used to be a lawyer. I used to be a federal prosecutor. I understood that world. But to go back to the person I looked up to, Abraham Lincoln had this famous quote, which I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it's basically like, the lawyer who chooses to represent themselves has an idiot for a client, meaning like, because you shouldn't represent yourself because you get emotion, your personal emotions get in the way. And I think I was overly mindful of that. And I was very paralyzed by the whole thing. Like, I think back to like the version of myself I was during the first parts of the case and up through losing the trial. I was I don't recognize myself. I was a very passive person. I was very deferential to my lawyers. Like, I just hoped for the best and tried to stay out of the way. And when it came to after losing the trial, we decided, the two of us, that we were going to win the sentencing. And I believe we won the sentencing because the two of us went into it together. And it didn't happen instantly after losing the trial. So we lost the trial at the beginning of October. At the end of October, a couple that's good friends called us and said, "Come spend a weekend with us." And we spent the weekend with them, and they basically said, "Stop moping, get off your butt, get back to life." And I don't think they were saying like, "Go take over the sentencing yourselves." They were saying like, "Get back to life, go do things." And so we came back. I remember because it was Halloween weekend, and we came back on the 1st of November, and we decided, I need to get going and do something. I started reaching out to all the nonprofits that had always wanted me to work with them and that I'd worked with in the past. I needed to get busy thinking, get my brain going.
Is this when the Ukraine stuff started too?
This is exactly when the Ukraine stuff started. We talked it over on that weekend after our friends just kind of gave us a bit of a kick in the pants. And we went for this really long hike, the two of us, on the last day that we were there with our friends. And we left them and went for this hike. And we talked about it. And we said, I'm going to try and find some place to volunteer. We talked it out. And I had been very active in kind of like 3 areas as a volunteer in the past. One, I had been helping with some Ukraine stuff, but more, I'd been helping in cybersecurity, mentoring people and child safety stuff. And I'd worked with a lot of diversity groups in cybersecurity as I was building my team. So when we came back, I started reaching out to the different groups and seeing if I could help them. And unfortunately, none of them wanted to be associated with me. All the ones that had bugged me for years and that I had done stuff with, they said, "We can't be associated with you. Like, it'll impact our fundraising and stuff like that." The only people who didn't care about my brand at that point were the people in Ukraine who had bigger issues of concern.
Yeah, they've got bigger concerns than the news stories about Joe Sullivan. So I guess then what I'm taking from you is, if you'd go back, you'd have got more your advice to yourself would be get active and more involved earlier.
Yes. Don't leave your life in other people's hands. Like, you gotta take, and we did that. We really aggressively did that with the case.
Makes sense.
We feel like we had a huge impact on the sentencing because of, we didn't proactively go out and ask for hundreds of letters, but we were supportive of it and ended up having hundreds of people send. Like, I always joke that I got to experience my own Irish wake during that extended period because of all these letters that kept coming in that people wrote to the judge. We submitted 186 or something like that letters to the judge, and one was signed by 60 people, another signed by 40 people, another signed by 30. So like hundreds of people wrote letters. And then we had a bunch of letters we didn't even submit because they were more generic, and we thought they would like distract from the impact of the other ones. So we did those things. We were very active in saying what we wanted in the in our legal arguments for a change.
And I knew the judge like the back of my hand. I read every one of his former cases. Like, I understood what worked and what didn't work. At the end of the day, we're all human. Like, even if you're a lawyer or a judge,
you socially engineered the judge.
Yeah,
is where we're going here. But Prathiba, what would you go back and tell yourself? Would it be the same lesson, like do more earlier, or would it be something different?
I think definitely do more earlier. I agree with that part. Um, I think uh, another aspect I think for me would also be like be okay with getting help from the community. Like just as people who are very individualists, we're pretty good at like, being strong on the outside. But every time there's a call from a friend and they ask, like, how are you doing? It actually made a difference.
Mm.
And to be okay and be more vulnerable with your friends, family, that's another thing I think I would tell myself that it's okay to get help.
That's a
Yeah,
really
that's
valuable
I,
lesson.
that really resonates with me. I think that I'm bad at asking people for help, and I even in these situations, I don't think I was very good at it. But when I started asking for help, it was amazing to see how many people stepped up.
Yeah, the community stands together. Right? I have one last question. Have you seen the movie About Time? You should go and watch it. Put it on your list. Watch it tonight. It's a movie about a family where the men are able to time travel, right? And they're able to go back in time and relive things. It's a bit of a butterfly effect, but it's a brilliant movie. It's probably my wife's favorite movie. And one of the interesting things about it is towards the end, when he goes back and relives moments, he says that when you come back into the present, you're able to be grateful for things that happened then that you're not able to, that you wouldn't be able to be grateful for otherwise, right? It's about learning from experience and seeing what you're grateful for. I guess that's my question is now it's kind of done, it's over. Like, what are you grateful for now? What have you realized you're grateful for that you didn't know you were then? Like, what realizations have you had?
It's so funny you say this because just this week when we were at church on Sunday, I told him, I came out and I said, oh, one of the things that was gratitude and just how um, how I just like feel this gratitude that we're in this place at this time when he could have just been coming out of prison right now.
Mm,
um and like there's so many things we're grateful for that time, and actually even this conversation is helping remember that my family and friends, not one of them looked at me and said, what are you doing with this person? Like every one of them was like supportive. So there's so many things we're grateful for, and I think the main thing is family for me.
mm,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm grateful for Pratibha being there with me through it all. Like that period where I was able to take control, I wouldn't have been able to do it the same way without her, because you just go through so many emotional ups and downs when you're in the middle of something like this, and um, sometimes you just need a shoulder, and other times you need a kick in the pants, and other times you need some clapping, and like having a partner through it who was really in it with you meant a lot. So I would say that's number one. Number two was definitely family. We had so much family support. I have six brothers and sisters,
oh, wow.
and uh, but they all live on the other side of the country. We live in California, and they're East Coast in Europe. But
And they all visited during trial,
they
and they
took.
were there in the court.
So we had a constant rotation of family coming out and supporting, and then like the cybersecurity community was outstanding. It's a people go into cybersecurity not because they think it's the most lucrative profession. They go into it because it's a profession that is, I think, a noble profession. It's people who um, want to help other people. We get to use technology, but we do it in the service of protecting people.
Mm.
And it shows in that community in times like this. Um, the last thing I'll say on this, what are you grateful for? I thought Pratibha was going to say something different, which is she more than once has said to me, going through this was the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah. It just it completely changed the way we look at the world. And I don't like some of the lessons are best learned during hard times, and the lessons we learned from going through this is just it's changed our perspective. It's changed how we look at the world and what our priorities are and who our friends are. Like friends are the ones who stand by you when there's nothing to gain from standing by you, and we know who those people are now. And we just like, there's so many intangibles. So I'm actually grateful for that experience that we went through together, and I'm happy that I was around for that experience. um, I think that there's this one scene that sums it all up when I talk about gratitude and what we're grateful for, is when we won the sentencing and we came out. Like, the whole courtroom was filled with friends and people from the community. When we won the sentencing, there was like a little bit of a press, and we came out and the whole hallway was filled with, people from his old eBay colleagues and Facebook colleagues, and people from the community. And when we came out, they all clapped, and it was like, you're supposed to be quiet in the courtroom, but that didn't necessarily take place. And it was literally like a movie scene where we came out and it's just hundreds of people standing and clapping. And I think that kind of sums it up. Um, yeah, that was the final climactic conclusion.
I feel like that's also a great place to end, on quite a deep and philosophical thought. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? I ask every guest the same thing.
I think you got some of the highs and some of the lows, that's for sure.
That was always the aim. Then thank you very much for your time. And I think that one thing that I can say is that you talk about the community strengthening you. I've seen, Joe, I've seen you speak in a lot of places. You've given back a tremendous amount to the community. There's a lot of us who have learned things about cyber insurance and insuring yourself and how to deal with breaches and personal communications and communication plans that none of us had ever thought about before. So I think you have given back in bucketfuls what the community gave you in support. So thank you as well. And thank you both for sharing in quite an open and authentic way. I'm grateful we had this conversation. If anyone wants to learn any more, they can reach out to Joe Prathiba via LinkedIn, hopefully not in a dating approach, and learn more about the stuff they're doing in Ukraine too. They do a lot for Ukraine to raise technology and computing equipment into the Ukraine, which I think is really important as well, that we try and find ways to give back ourselves. But otherwise, thank you both very much. It's been an absolute pleasure on my half.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks. Bye-bye.